At the head of the County Tyrone village of Donaghmore stands the community's oldest resident. The ageing Celtic High Cross maintains a silent watch over its people, a vigil which has lasted since before this millennium and the last. Generations have passed beneath the enduring presence of the cross. It has counted the seasons and years of many lives. Immortalised in the minds of those who have lived in the village, it is a heritage which has passed with them across the borders of distance and time. The weathered stone carvings record the story of creation since Adam and Eve, but piecing together the fragments we can gather of its long existence also tells us something of the lives of the people who have resided in the area. The cross has seen sorrow and joy, life and death. Its own story, surrounded by quiet mystery, our heritage carved in its crumbling stone. The community of Donaghmore have become concerned that the forces of man and nature are taking their toll on the elderly monument. It is now up to them to decide what action should be taken to preserve the cross for future generations in the village and beyond.
If you came to a monastic site, a monastery, any time between 550 and about 1100, you couldn't help but notice the high crosses. The Donaghmore Cross is one of the many high crosses which were sculptured and set up about this particular time. According to Liam de Puer, who's an expert on this, he dates the Donaghmore Cross to the year 875. And the cross, or a number of crosses, would have been set up around the Donaghmore monastic settlement. Not every monastic settlement had a cross, but many of them did have. It was sort of an individual thing. And these crosses would have been carved by a group of travelling craftsmen, or a guild of travelling craftsmen with a master mason or a master builder who would do the designing, and then there would be some input from the local abbot who would like to give advice about what he would like to see on the panels of the cross. On the back side, that is the west side, you had scenes from the Old Testament, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham, and so on. In the New Testament, for example, you have panels depicting the Annunciation, you have panels depicting the wedding feast of Cana, you have panels depicting the news of the birth of Jesus. Now, it is more than likely that these panels were coloured to portray even more clearly the figures on it. And as you can understand, in those days it would have been much clearer then and easier to decipher and understand than they are now. So if you like, they were sort of early catechisms, ways of teaching people about the faith. The only people really who could read it right were the priests and monks of the monastery and some of the nobles. So that was their purpose, and probably they were very effective. If you like, they were to a certain extent sermons in stone. Even probably used to educate the novices, the people who came to be monks, in the mysteries of the religion and the stories and so on at an early stage before they started to write. If you look at the cross, you'll see that there's evidence of damage. You'll also notice that it's two crosses. I mean, it's a combination of two crosses, shall we say. The lower shaft and the upper shaft belong to two different crosses. So that's the question, what happened to the other two bits and what happened to the head of the cross that got damaged? It is speculated that during the rebellion of 1641, this damage occurred. It was a very unsettled period, especially in this part of the world, Dungannon, Donaghmore area. This was the centre of the rebellion of the native Irish against the recent plantation of, say, 1609, 1610. The parliamentary army, as it was then, would have had a certain antipathy towards icons, crosses, statues and that sort of thing. It may be that they damaged the cross. It may also be that the local people removed the cross from where it was and hid it somewhere until the trouble was over, and in doing so the damage was caused and these bits were lost. Now this is speculation, but I think there is some basis for thinking so. Had it occurred at an earlier stage, it is possible that in the Inquisition in 1609 to do with the plantation, some mention may have been made of it. And the cross as we see it today down there in the village was found along the banks of the torrent, about 100 yards or so from where it stands. It obviously had lain there for some time and then had been brought up and placed in its present position by the then rector of Donaghmore, the Reverend Mr. Vincent. And that was in the year 1776. So the cross is standing in its present position for about 224 years. But it's been in Donaghmore for a lot longer than that, both standing and lying. Well, over the years since it was set up there, it's a focal point for the village. If you want to meet someone, just to meet you at the cross, well, that was fine. Everybody knew where the cross was. It was also, during the late 18th and early 19th century, a venue for political meetings.
This treaty represents the first consensus between British and Irish governments in over 700 years.
The Irish National Parliamentary Party would have had meetings there and so on. I've read accounts of that sort of thing. But no longer is that the case. I wouldn't like to be trying to have a meeting there now because you'd be run over by the traffic.
We'll bring freedom for our country. Yes! I plead to every single one of you here today. No longer do we want our children growing up in a country.
Well, the cross means so much to people in the village because they have come to think of it as a symbol of Donaghmore. Wherever they travel in the world, people will always come back to Donaghmore, and the first thing they will look for is the cross. And wherever they go in the world, they will carry this picture of the cross with them. The cross is synonymous with Donaghmore. For example, James Dilworth went to the ends of the earth and carried the picture of the cross with him in his mind. And of course we have the results of that in the cross being put up at the Dilworth Boys' School in Auckland.
The cross was obviously a very significant memory that he carried all those years from Donaghmore. It's a large cross. To a small child it must even appear larger and more significant, and one can imagine him looking up and wondering at the scenes depicted on it. So it obviously had a big effect on him. It is one that he carried all his days. In later years, when he was in New Zealand, he reminisced and told them people there that he would have gone to and from school at Donaghmore past the old cross. Well, after a period at the school in Donaghmore, he was for a few years educated at the Royal School in Dungannon, Now, probably as a boarder, that would have entailed quite a bit of expense, because at the time the boarding fees in Donaghmore Royal School were about £80 a year. Now, it is assumed that the bill was footed by his Aunt Anne, who took him under her wing, shall we say, and was a sort of a mother figure for him. She would have paid for James's education at the Royal School, I think from perhaps about 1826 until 1830, when he was 15.
Hope you worked hard now.
Worked really hard.
I'm sure you did. You're very good, I must say.
And he served for a number of years on the Provincial Council in Auckland, and he was for a while on the Education Committee of the Council. So he had that early interest in education. And when he came to make his will, he was looking around. He and his wife had no children and no obvious heirs where he could leave his fortune. So he decided to set up a trust which would establish a school to look after and educate boys from straitened circumstances in Auckland. Certainly there are still strong links between Dungannon and the Royal School and the school in Auckland, and there is an exchange of, I think, 3 students each way every year.
The Donaghmore Cross has been made hugely important in our school. It's been commemorated by the Old Boys Association in 1995. They put a cross up, and they sent people over here to find out about the cross over here, because of course James Dilworth used to walk past the cross to his early days school, and that was a memory that he spoke of to a McMurray, who was one of the original board members on the trust. So that has been spoken of and heard of through the last 60 to 100 years, and the trust put money towards it. The old boys decided to get a sculptor, and they brought him over here. They got the rock from over here in Ireland, they transported it all back to New Zealand, and they've duplicated the Donaghmore Cross in Dilworth School. The Dilworth Cross, being produced in 1995 as a brand new replica, looks and feels fantastic. It is 3-dimensional. You touch it, you feel it, you see the story, it comes alive. It tells the story of the birth, the death of Christ, the ancient Celtic history, the chopping of the hand. It has it all in the cross. All 4 sides, 4 faces, right through its full height, are all very, very well ornate. At night it's lit up with spotlights, so you walk past it at night and you can just, it has an eerie feeling to it. It's wonderful. I visited the cross in Donaghmore on the very first day in Ireland. It holds a lot of significance to us coming from Dilworth School, and everyone who's come from Dilworth School to Ireland has always visited the Donaghmore Cross. Instantly I recognised it as an old cross. Carvings were not recognisable from my memory of the ones at Dilworth. I could just isolate a few bumps that were in there, but I couldn't see the distinct panels. It was old, and it's sort of like what I expected, but far more decrepit than what I really had anticipated.
I was aware of this deterioration of the cross way back in 1972. At that time, in my business interests, I had a man came over to the village. He was our agent in Sweden from the old town of Uppsala, which has many old monastic remains and many old Viking stones. And they discovered there, the university discovered that there was a very big deterioration of all the old stone buildings caused by the car exhausts, and the old stone buildings were turning to gypsum and flaking away. And when I brought him up, he was initially interested in the stone walls around Donaghmore, but when we walked up the village and he saw the cross, he couldn't believe it that this cross would be exposed, and he started to show me little pieces that were flaking off it. And he really almost went mad that we would have something like that out in the atmosphere. And that was at a time when we had 1/3 of the traffic we have today. The study made by the girls of Donaghmore Convent way back about 6 years ago had a very, very big impact on people's thinking.
Well, being in school in Donaghmore, there was a lot of talk about the High Cross, and it's very big as part of Donaghmore, the culture. And I was doing geography GCSE, and our teacher thought it would benefit us with our studies. I carried out the project, Is Air Pollution Affecting the High Cross of Donaghmore, with a girl, Erin Clark. And what we really wanted to determine was air pollution the main factor causing the rapid deterioration. Our findings were that the pH of the rainfall which we collected over the 3 months was quite acidic, with an average of 4.7. This was quite acidic for a rural village. It was more like something that would be found in a city. We also found from the traffic survey that there would be around about 7,000 vehicles going past the cross each day, which we could not believe. We didn't think it would be as many as that. And the DOE also helped us with figures on the other traffic surveys they had carried out, and that we found that the sulphur dioxide concentrations were quite high, which is indicated by the lichen growth around the bottom and the sides of the cross. A study like this had never been done before. We were the first ones to actually get figures to prove that the cross was deteriorating, because before this all we had to go on was photographs, and as the photographs from hundreds of years ago weren't of really good quality, it's very hard to use them as a comparison for the cross today, but it can be seen that the figures have eroded away badly. From our study, there was now facts to prove that the cross is deteriorating, and a lot of people then became, more concerned for the cross.
The cross is in the care of the Department of the Ancient Monuments, and the professional people in the Department of the Ancient Monuments have been most helpful to our society in Donaghmore over the years, and they immediately came and had a meeting with us one evening. 2 of their representatives, they consulted with us, and they advised us to hold a public meeting and have the whole matter aired at a public meeting in Donaghmore. It's very critical that everyone be consulted and be happy with any change that should take place. The biggest shock that people in the village got was the same shock that we got when we found that this cross was disappearing in front of our eyes. So when people appreciated that, we all wanted to do something, and we all wanted to keep this cross, which is only given to us in our generation for the good of future generations. So there was total unanimity at the meeting that the cross should be somehow preserved.
As with so much stone carving, outdoor sculpture of that age, the detail of the figures carved into the surface, biblical scenes and the like, has become very, very severely denuded. And it's safe to say that unless you're an expert on art history, interpreting some of the scenes is becoming more and more difficult. At the meeting in Donaghmore, we went through the various alternatives, which range from coating the surface with something that sinks deeply enough into it to hold it together and protect it from the atmosphere, which includes, of course, rain and sun, not just traffic pollution. We talked about covers, shelters, and went into how hideous they can be to look at, besides sometimes setting up little internal microenvironments all of their own, which don't help the stone at all. We certainly talked about moving an object as big as a cross, and most people knew about what had been going on at Clonmacnoise in County Offaly and how things had been moved there into nearby places of shelter, and the originals replaced on site with very fair replicas.
The only option that appeared to be feasible was the option that has been used now throughout the south of Ireland and throughout Europe, was to move the cross into some kind of a controlled environment, which would mean putting it into a purpose-built building.
The suitable building in which the cross will be placed will also serve as an interpretive centre where there will be information on the Donaghmore Cross, information on the background to high crosses themselves, and photographs and examples of other high crosses especially from the north of Ireland, but from other parts of Ireland as well. For example, we'll feature the Arboe Cross, which is suffering somewhat similar damage.
New Zealand people came over and they were concerned that the cross wasn't performing the original function for which it was sculptured. In other words, the scriptural pictures had totally disappeared. So they made a replica looking like what it looked like 1,000 years ago. I think that kind of a replica is also very, very important, but it shouldn't occupy the position where the present cross is, but it should be available somewhere that people should have the benefit of looking at that. The replica that will go in the place of the present cross will have to be an exact copy of what is there today.
Is there general consensus? That's hard to know. Recently, I think the Women's Institute ran a survey or had a petition not to have the cross removed. Open discussion and debate is the best way of solving it. No decisions will be made if the people don't want it to happen.
Nobody wants to lose a local landmark. Everybody has memories about something. A great many people feel that the original in all walks of life is what's important, and some tuppenny halfpenny copy set in its place, no matter if it's made of stone, metal or paper, is not the same thing. The ambience and what people can remember about it, their associations with it, are the important things. And this is what, of course, is the main obstacle to those people who feel that they have to move something because it's going to deteriorate further.
It's very difficult to foresee exactly at this stage what steps will be taken to preserve the cross for the future. Presently, as I said, a small subcommittee are examining the whole proposition of preserving the cross. And what will happen then when their findings are solidified, they will come forward and another public meeting will be held, and the whole matter at that public meeting will be discussed, and an agreement then will be hammered out at that meeting.
I feel, as regards moving the cross, that it's a necessity. It's a necessity that I don't particularly want to see happening. I'd prefer if it didn't have to be done. But for the ultimate preservation of the cross, I feel that it has to be done. Wouldn't it be nice, I think as I said before, 1100 years from now, that our descendants would thank us for having preserved the cross for them to see? Because if it stands where it is now in its originality, it will maybe still be there, but it will be totally indecipherable, and maybe more damage, certainly more damage than it is today.
As the faces on the ageing stonework dissolve into the centuries, the new meaning of Donaghmore Cross lies in the faces of the many people who have passed it every day of their lives. As the cross has watched over them, they too now watch over the cross. Of the many stories it can tell, perhaps the most interesting is its own. The story is one which will be enshrined in the village of Donaghmore and its people forever.